Well, I'm really excited to be with you guys today. When Gary told me what the theme was, I thought, gosh, it's kind of right up my alley. So if you don't know, the theme for this month is all about listening. And as someone who practices sound, listening is kind of a thing. And so for me personally, listening has been, a big part of my life. Being in the recording industry and working in the studio, you listen so, closely to every single thing that you record. And I had a studio engineer tell me one time, Kristen, you're hearing micro pitches in there and no one can hear that. And I'm like, yeah, but I hear it, so we need to fix that. So, critical listening is one thing, active listening is a whole other thing. And so when we talk about listening, we can talk about external listening. We can also talk about internal listening. And we're going to talk about both of those today. So thank you guys so much for, inviting me to share and being here to listen. So do you guys remember the game of telephone? Like probably most of us played in this room. And it would start, with one person they would either make something up or a teacher would tell them, here's what you're going to whisper. And you get one chance to whisper it to the person next to you, right? And you whisper it to that person and it gets passed all the way around the circle. And slowly as that gets passed, the message kind of gets lost in translation, yeah? And by the time it finishes, it's usually something completely different than what it started as. And so that can happen to us as we go through life. It's like, a lot of times as kids, we hear things internally a lot more clearly than we do as adults, unless we cultivate that listening. And so, again, that's something that we'll talk about a little bit today. And so I want to talk about the difference first between listening and hearing. Because those are two things that tend to go together, but they're actually very, very different. So when we talk about hearing, we hear everything. If we all got quiet right now, there are things that I can hear in this room that we're not consciously paying attention to, but we hear them. And so that is a physiologic thing happening in our body. And so when we hear things, it has to do with waves in the field, because every sound, and this is where, gosh, I could geek out talking about this kind of stuff all day long. But when we're hearing things, whether we're actively paying attention to it or not, it's waves moving through the field that touch on our eardrum. Do you guys know about how the ear works and how it converts sound from waves in the air? So it, basically vibrates our eardrum, and then it goes from our eardrum to our ossicles, which our ossicles are the smallest bone in the body. And then those ossicles pass it along, and it ends up eventually getting to our cochlea. And in the cochlea, that's where sort of the magic happens, because it goes from a wave in the air to a wave in fluid. And that fluid is what then vibrates 25,000 little nerve endings. And it turns that wave in the air into electricity in our body. And those nerves send those electrical signals to our brain, and we register that wave as sound. That's how we hear. So again, we hear all the time. If you just listen for a moment. I don't know if it's like air that I'm hearing, or there's something there that we can hear, right? It's background noise, essentially, but it's being registered in our body and our brain as an electric signal. So hearing happens passively. And then we have listening. And listening is where we engage the mind and we actually give our attention to what we're hearing. So listening becomes more of a mind-body connecting experience. And that is a powerful thing, because that is when sound can give us an opportunity to actually consciously affect what's happening in our body. So that's just the simple difference between hearing and listening. And when we really begin to listen to what's happening within us and listening to our body is when we really kind of begin to shift into our place of personal power. That's my belief. Our body gives us cues and signals all the time. The Bluebird Cafe in Nashville. Have you guys heard of this? Oh my gosh. I can't believe you guys haven't heard of the Bluebird. Okay, so the Bluebird is a very famous place in Nashville. Lots of artists got their start there. I would say probably the biggest one is Taylor Swift. She got her start at the Bluebird Cafe. Garth Brooks got his start at the Bluebird Cafe. All kinds of people have performed there. Mary Chapin Carpenter. I think Dolly has performed there. But, you look at major artists, particularly in the country world, it is not uncommon to hear that they got their start at the Bluebird Cafe. So in order to get a gig at the Bluebird Cafe, you have to actually apply to play there. You have to submit music, and then there's a team of people who review the music, and they say, okay, we want to invite this artist to perform on our stage, because they're very closely connected with record labels and producers and all of that. So there was a gentleman there who, his name is Brian Kennedy. Has anyone heard of Brian Kennedy? Probably not, because he's sort of a behind-the-scenes music guy. So Brian Kennedy was a regular producer that would go to the Bluebird Cafe, and he actually grew up. His dad was also a record producer, so he had been in the industry, and when he was a kid, his dad was working with, I think it was Jerry Lewis is who his dad was working with, and he had the opportunity to shake hands with Jerry Lewis, and he said, when I shook hands with Jerry Lewis, there was electricity in my system, and I felt it. Fast forward, I want to say 10 years later. I think he said he was 10 or something, roughly, when that happened. So fast forward another 10 to 15 years, and I think he said he was at the airport maybe and bumped into Muhammad Ali and had the opportunity to shake hands with Muhammad Ali. Same feeling happened in his body, electricity. So Brian Kennedy is at the Bluebird Cafe, and most of the time the people who are performing there are no names, because they're the people who are trying to catch a break so that, they get to sign their deal and then they go on to become these great musical artists. So he's there one evening, and a young man performs, and he goes up and he shakes his hand and he gets that same feeling. And so he's like, something about this guy. This is a guy that no one knew at the time. But he said, I have to work with this guy. I don't know if there was another label who was there who was interested in him, and they said, are you going to sign him? Because if you're not taking him, I'm working with this guy. Because this was his third experience having that feeling in his body that told him there was something there. And he listened, and he ended up signing and working with Garth Brooks. And when he tells the story himself, it's actually really cool to hear him tell it. He gets emotional about it. And he's like, I know it sounds crazy, but when you have that feeling, you can't ignore it. And he was tuned in with his intuition, and he followed it and was greatly rewarded for listening. So it's really a powerful thing when we can tune in with the signals that our body is sending us and really learn to listen. So I want to talk a little bit about noise. Because if we're going to talk about listening, we got to talk about noise. So we live in a city. We can hear the airport from here. I live 5 minutes from here. I can hear the planes at my house, the cars outside. In general, there's always noise around us when we're in a city. And, not to be a Debbie Downer up here, but noise is actually now considered the second greatest environmental threat to our health, second to air pollution. is noise, because it affects our body so much. And that's one of the reasons that it's so important to actively choose to be in spaces with less noise. Nature is a beautiful space to do that. Forest bathing, that's a practice. Obviously, they label it forest bathing as it's a Japanese practice, but it's something that if you go out and you hike and you're aware while you're hiking and you're paying attention to your surroundings and you're listening to things that you hear and you're observing nature, you're essentially practicing forest bathing. It's receiving all of the frequencies that nature gives us, and nature is the original thought. The great source which created nature created all of us. And so the closer that we can get to that source, the quieter things will become. And so nature is a great place to do that. So noise, sometimes we choose to incorporate noise, background noise or white noise or whatever it may be. And we can use noise in a variety of ways. We can use it to drown out other sounds that we don't want to hear. Maybe if we live in an apartment building and we can hear noise from other people living in our building, we'll turn on music so that we have something to sort of mask the other noise that's around us. And inherently, I do want to say, even as a musician, noise is not a bad thing because everything is simply frequencies, but it's a matter of how harmonic are those frequencies. So again, yes, noise isn't great for us. We need to consciously and actively choose to be in spaces with less noise. But it's also one of those things where there is a time and a place for everything. Everything ebbs and flows. And so I don't want to be up here saying, noise is bad. We live in a city. This is so bad. That is not at all what I'm saying. But it's recognizing that we have to balance that, like everything in life. And we can talk about external noise. We can also talk about internal noise. And internal noise really has everything to do with our nervous system. Because the nervous system is what regulates everything happening in our body. The state of our nervous system determines the hormones that are released in our system. I've mentioned it, I think, here before, but HeartMath. Are you guys familiar with HeartMath? I'm sure some of you are. They have great language, I feel like, for explaining essentially the state of our nervous system and the hormones that are released. They use the terms renewing and depleting. Because a lot of times we tend to think of things as like positive or negative or good or bad, but it's not looking at it like that, because there are times when stress hormones are good for us. They can literally save our lives at times. But when we get into the state where we're stuck there is when it becomes an issue. So we think of it more in terms of there are certain things that renew our energy, and there are other things that deplete our energy. And again, it's all a balance. We're always in flux and in flow. So it's not that one is good or bad. It's a matter of doing what we need to do to maintain that balance. So with our nervous system, we can feel exactly the state that we're in if we pay attention. The movie Inside Out 2 came out, I want to say this last summer. Has anybody in here? So you've seen it. Okay, so great depiction, right? Inside Out 2, if you haven't seen the original Inside Out, it's essentially introducing all of the emotions that we start to feel in our life. And in Inside Out 2, what they do is they bring in the emotions that sort of come in as we get near the age of puberty, the big one being anxiety. So musically, I think of everything in terms of music. So musically, when we think of anxiety, it's going to sound sharp. So I'll just play over here. I talked to high schoolers from Eden Prairie the other day, and I was talking to them about this sort of thing. And so if this is our, sort of baseline oscillation for our nervous system, when we hit anxiety, it's going to make us go there. It's going to speed everything up in our system. And every emotion has an effect on us like that. It's either going to speed things up or slow things down. And we're always shifting between those states. So it's important that we learn how to self-regulate our nervous system. And that's when we start to turn down the noise inside of us, is by learning how to regulate our nervous system. So in Inside Out 2, she gets to a point where her anxiety is just through the roof, and she's basically starting to have a panic attack. Do you guys remember what she does? She breathes. So there are a variety of ways to regulate our nervous system. But the tool that we are all given, that we have access to at every single moment in time, is our breath. So that's one way that we can help quiet the internal noise. But for some people, if you say, okay, we're going to sit down and breathe, and they have a lot of noise, that's not really going to go over very well, because it's going to make things feel louder. So it's a matter of finding active ways, and we can actively breathe in a way. And that's where, things like breath of fire, where you're pumping your stomach and you're pushing out of your nose, more active breaths would definitely be more beneficial for people who have a lot of noise in their system. But if you sit with someone who's noisy and say, okay, we're going to sit and we're just going to breathe, they're going to go, oh my gosh. That makes things louder. So there are other ways that we can actively help quiet the nervous system. Moving our body is one of them. When we move our body, we are moving energy. And when we have excess energy in our system and things are running a little fast, moving helps. I know in Qigong, one of the things they have you do is just shaking, right? You do enough of that, and it actually really helps calm your whole system. Just going for a walk, any sort of movement. And some people will say exercise. I don't like to say exercise because it's not about exercising. It's just about moving. And that can look like anything. It can be dancing. It can just be literally flailing your body around. Like, it doesn't matter. It's just about moving your body, because that moves energy. So if our nervous system is stuck in a loud, noisy place, move. That's an active way to help turn down the volume. So we talked about breathing, movement. The other thing is nature. Just being in nature, moving outside in nature. I know we're about to move into winter, which can make that a little challenging, but if you're bundled up and you move enough, you warm up real quick. And hand in hand with nature, another thing that can really help calm our nervous system is animals, animal therapy. Wellspring Health Center in Eden Prairie, where I do sound baths every Wednesday, has started offering kitten yoga once a month, where you go and there are 20 kittens running around the place, and you're, doing yoga, sort of. And they're working on bringing in puppy yoga so that, if you're not a cat person, well, we have dogs. But there's something about the energy of an animal that can help calm our system. That, to me, is hand in hand with nature. And it's really about finding what is it that works for you to calm your nervous system. For me, this guy right here. I have used this since I was 17 years old. I picked up a guitar. I learned a song on my dad's guitar when I was 17. And that for me, no matter what state I'm in, if I sit and I play my guitar, it calms me down. And singing, like those are my two things. These other things that I'm mentioning are definitely tools that I use as well, but it's a matter of building your toolbox and figuring out what it is for you, because it's different for every single one of us. But it's figuring out what is it for you that helps to calm down your nervous system when things inside get noisy. And the point of doing that is so that we can really learn to listen to our body. Because our body is always communicating with us. And that's where, as you know, a person who works with sound, the field is my canvas, the space around us. Like, I like to think that musically what I'm doing is I'm painting on the field, if you think about it visually. And so when we basically think about, okay, you know, there are all these waves happening in the field around us all the time. Right now, specifically, the field is very noisy, right? We're a few weeks away from an election. Like, there's a lot of noise in the field, and there has been for a while. And we can actively choose if we're tuned into the noise or if we're tuned into the harmony. Because the reality is that the noise is a very small amount of what's actually happening. Because within us alone, in order for us to be sustained in these bodies, the amount of harmony that has to happen in this system so that everything works together, it's amazing. Nature is pure harmony. It's a matter of what you're paying attention to. And if you're noisy inside, it's going to feel very noisy outside. And that's where we have to consciously choose to tune in with the harmony rather than the noise. And it's very easy to tune in with the noise because that's what mainstream mind is tuned into. So it takes conscious effort to say, yes, I can recognize this is all happening. I actually just got back from a trip with a friend of mine who we hadn't traveled. We've been friends for 15 years, and we do trips together. We do big trips together, and we hadn't traveled together in about 8 years. And my life in the last 8 years has changed a lot. And she actually knew me when I was still in the recording industry. And when I was in that industry, mainstream radio, top 40 radio, you know, what are the number one songs being played right now? That was 100% my reality. Mainstream mind. And in the time since we've traveled together 8 years ago, I do everything I can to stay out of that mainstream mind. I try and stay tapped into what's happening there, just because it is important to stay relevant. But I have consciously chosen to create my own reality that is not within the main mind. So she was playing songs for me that since I've gotten home, I've only been back a week. I actually looked up like I looked up the Billboard Top 100 for like this week. And I was like, oh, 2 of these songs are like top 5. I had no idea. And I actually love that I had no idea because I was consciously choosing to keep my mind focused elsewhere. And to keep my reality in tune with harmony. Because I know that if I tune in with the noise, it's going to show up in me. And that doesn't feel good. And that's where we can recognize the state that we're in based on how we feel. And those are things that really we've kind of been taught to ignore. Doesn't matter how you feel. This is what you're going to do. Well, it does matter how you feel. And those are your tells, right? Bless you. I think that was a sneeze. I don't know. Let me just check and see if there's anything that I want to make sure that I touch on here. Your body is telling you. It's telling you things all the time. And the other thing that I like to mention as far as noise goes is that sometimes we're so comfortable with the noise that we just continue to choose that over and over and over again. Because it's more comfortable to stay in noise than to sit with ourselves. And the only reason for that is because somewhere along the way, there's been a belief put in our system somewhere that has told us that who we are is not okay. And so when we sit with the truth of who we are, we think, ooh, it's not okay to be that person. Everything has told me that that person is not okay. For whatever reason, whatever it is about that person. But the reality is that that person is a seed of the divine housed in a human body and can be nothing less than perfection. But when we have built these walls and created all this noise so that we don't have to meet that person, it can be really hard to peel away all those layers to get back to that divine seed. But that divine seed is holding harmony. And that is what, when we get really quiet, we can really hear. And I love, actually, Oprah says it beautifully. Your life speaks to you in whispers. But if we're in a noisy place, you can't hear a whisper. I like to call them taps. Like the universe is just, hey, I'm just going to tap you on the shoulder. This way. And it's that seed of the divine, that harmonic node that is at the center of each of us, that knows exactly how to guide us through this life so that we flow with harmony. And I love harmony. So for me with sound, the gong, I brought the gong today. I used to be here at the 9 a.m. service, I don't know, every other month or so, doing just sound healing. And then I have kind of shifted, and now I'm here speaking occasionally. But the gong is an incredibly powerful instrument when it comes to turning up the noise so that we can sort of break through that, wade through that, and find that divine seed. But that can be really uncomfortable for people. It's sort of like the really active breath work that turns everything on and shakes everything up. The gong does a similar thing. And so if we are holding noise in our system, this instrument can help resonate that noise to move. And with that, a lot of times, beliefs will come to the surface. Stories that we've held in our mind and in our body can come to the surface. And that's where we get an opportunity to ask ourselves how we feel about that story. We're allowed to change our minds. Byron Katie, is anybody familiar with her work? Few people. Is it true? When we bring up the noise that's in our system, is it really true? Because the only truth really is that you are a seed of the divine, held in harmony and housed by love. Everything else is a story. So I'm going to play this gong, and I'm going to guide you guys in a little bit of breathing just to start. And if you have noise, that's okay. Most of us do. I've been doing a lot of work over the last several years, and I still have noise. It definitely gets quieter the more that we practice things and the more that we visit. Okay, what are these beliefs that I hold specifically about myself? Because that shows up in our beliefs about the world. So we'll do this for, what time is it? Maybe 10-ish minutes. And this is where I just want to encourage you guys, and I'll help you as we get started, but to listen to your body and pay attention to how things feel. And are there certain areas where it feels like something is there that wants to move that I'm trying to make sure it doesn't move? That is for you. So, I think that's all that I have that I really want to say. And then I'll just let this guy kind of do what it does. So go ahead and make yourselves comfortable. And we'll just start. If you want to close your eyes, you can close your eyes. If you want to keep them open, you can keep them open. But just go ahead and notice your breath. You don't need to change your breath at all. Just notice how it feels. When you inhale, notice how the air is cooler. And then it's warmed by your body. And as you exhale, that air is nice and warm. Notice how your toes feel. And the bottoms of your feet. Notice your ankles and the tops of your feet. Notice your shins and your calves. All around your knees. Up into your upper leg, the fronts, the backs, the sides, and the middle. Notice your bum on the seat, and your hips, and your pelvis. And feel that whole lower half of your body, from your toes up through your hips. And continue breathing. So we've tuned in with our lower half, and we'll continue up the body by feeling our belly and our low back, our chest and our mid back, and our upper back and shoulders. Feeling into your upper arms, down to your elbows, into your forearms and the back of your forearms, your wrists, the palms of your hands, the backs of your hands, your thumb, first finger, middle finger, ring finger, and pinky finger. So we're feeling from our toes up through our legs, into our torso, down our arms all the way to our fingertips. And we can feel our whole body. And now we tune into our throat and the back of our neck and the sides of our neck. Feeling your ears, your jaw, your nose, your lips, your eyes and eyebrows, your forehead, your temples, the back of your head, and the very top of your head. So from the tips of your toes to the tips of your fingers to the top of your head. Breathe. So everyone can go ahead and take one nice deep breath. And when you feel ready, you can open your eyes if they're still closed. Find your tools. Whatever it is that helps you turn down the internal volume and self-regulate your nervous system. Maybe it's sound. Maybe it's nature. Maybe it's breathing. Maybe it's dancing. It doesn't matter. But find those things. So thank you guys for sharing your Sunday morning with me on such a beautiful morning. I'm still going to play a little song on the guitar here because it's my favorite thing in the world. But I'm going to let Neil do what he does first. Are we doing offering now? I'll do this during the offering. Okay. Thank you guys.
How wonderful is that? Oh, I enjoyed that. Now I have to stand up and speak. I forgot I got stuff over here. And I was enjoying very much so the gong. I was not familiar with all of the variations within that. That was a special treat. I would remind you that Lake Harriet Spiritual Community is funded by your donations. We own the building and all of the joy within it and keeping it all together. And we do look for your donations for that. You can find Venmo, believe it or not, for your donations. And we invite you to be a partner with us, support our spiritual community. And we're so grateful for your support. And we're going to get a song from Kristen.
Broken down and tired. So I'll rise up, rise like the day. I'll rise up, rise unafraid. I'll rise up, and I'll do it 1,000 times again.
Guys. How wonderful. John, Mike, come on up. What a treat it is, isn't it? Each week we get treated with wonderful, wonderful things. Now, if you might raise your hands and repeat after me. God's perfect love.
God's perfect love.
Flowing through me.
Flowing through me.
Blesses and multiplies.
Blesses and multiplies.
All that I give.
All that I give.
All that I receive.
All that I receive.
in all that I am.
and all that I am.
Thank you. Now, as we like to do at Lake Harriet Spiritual Community, first we stand up, get a little stretch on it, and turn to your left, turn to your right, and say hi to the people you've been enjoying this wonderful service with. I'm reminded by Don that this is something that we like to
Always
do.
good to see you. Oh, thank you so much.
Good morning.
It's my favorite thing in the world, so. Yeah.
And now what we are going to do is come up front and make a small circle, choose some place to cut through, and we'll join hands, and Miss Kristen will send us off into the day with some words of wonderful advice. We're going to cut across here somewhere. You girls can just stay right there, huh? Connect the circle right in the middle there.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much. And I hope that this just sends off your weekend on a positive note. And I always like to say at the end of a sound bath, now go resonate harmony in the world around you. So thank you all so much. Aho. Awesome.